Imagine devoting nearly 5 decades of your life to building a company that not only sells ice cream, but also stands for justice, equality, and social change, only to walk away heartbroken because the very values you built it on have been silenced. That's the dramatic reality facing Jerry Greenfield, the co-founder of Ben & Jerry's, who has just announced his resignation from the company after 47 years, accusing its British parent company Unilever of stripping away its independence and silencing its voice on critical social issues. This isn't just a story about ice cream. It's a story about corporate power, free expression, and the clash between profits and principles. Jerry Greenfield's announcement came through a statement shared by his longtime business partner and co-founder, Ben Cohen. In deeply emotional words, Greenfield said resigning was one of the hardest and most painful decisions he's ever had to make. He explained that standing up for justice, equity, and humanity has never been more important. Yet under Unilever's ownership, Ben & Jerry's has been silenced and sidelined for fear of upsetting those in power. These are powerful accusations, and they shine a spotlight on the growing tension between socially conscious brands and the corporations that own them. Think about it for a moment. This is not a small startup or an activist group. This is Ben & Jerry's, one of the most recognizable ice cream brands on the planet. From its very beginning, it was more than just dessert. It was about making a statement. Whether it was campaigning for climate action, championing racial justice, or openly criticizing wars, Ben & Jerry's had built a reputation as a brand unafraid to take sides on controversial issues. And now, according to Greenfield, that voice has been muzzled. The timing of this resignation is no coincidence. In recent months, Unilever has faced increasing criticism from both founders. Just last week, Greenfield and Cohen co-authored an open letter calling on Unilever to spin off Ben & Jerry's into an independent company once again. They argued that the brand's independence, something they claimed was guaranteed when they sold to Unilever back in 2000, has been steadily eroded. For over 20 years under Unilever, they said, Ben & Jerry's stood up boldly for human rights and peace. But today, that independence is gone. And here's where the story takes a dramatic twist. Greenfield's statement didn't shy away from connecting the silencing to the broader political climate in the United States. He accused the current administration of attacking civil rights, voting rights, women's rights, immigrant rights, and the LGBTQ community. To him, the stakes couldn't be higher. He framed his resignation not just as a career move, but as a moral stand, saying he could no longer, in good conscience, remain with a company that prevented him from speaking out in support of those values. But here's the big question. How did things get so bad between Ben & Jerry's and its parent company? Over the last several years, tensions have been mounting. In 2021, Ben & Jerry's made headlines when it announced it would end sales in Israeli-occupied Palestinian territories, citing its values as incompatible with profiting in disputed lands. That move sparked political backlash, particularly from Israel and some U.S. lawmakers, but it also reinforced the brand's reputation for bold social stands. Unilever, however, reportedly pushed back hard, worried about financial and political consequences. And that wasn't the only flashpoint. Earlier this year, Ben & Jerry's accused Unilever of breaching its merger agreement by ousting its CEO, David Stever, after the company posted about progressive issues, including abortion rights, climate change, and universal health care. The founders claimed Unilever unilaterally barred those posts, especially since they included references to former President Donald Trump. For a company that had built its name on activism, being censored like that felt like a betrayal of its very identity. It doesn't stop there. Just months ago, Ben & Jerry's filed a lawsuit accusing Unilever of censoring its support for Palestinian refugees and its calls for ending military aid to Israel. Each of these disputes painted a picture of a brand caught between its social mission and its corporate parents' priorities. And now, Greenfield's resignation is the ultimate symbol of that rift, walking away after nearly half a century because he says the promise of independence has been broken. Now pause for a moment and imagine the weight of this decision. Jerry Greenfield has been tied to Ben & Jerry's since day one, since he and Ben Cohen started scooping ice cream in a renovated gas station in Burlington, Vermont back in 1978. For 47 years, he's been a face of the company, not just in business but in activism. To walk away, he had to admit that the company he helped build no longer reflected the principles that gave it life. That's more than resignation. That's heartbreak. So what does Unilever have to say? The new entity that will soon control Ben & Jerry's, the Magnum Ice Cream Company, spun off from Unilever, responded through a spokesperson. They said they disagreed with Greenfield's perspective and had sought to engage both founders in constructive dialogue. In other words, they're pushing back, suggesting this was more about differences of opinion than corporate censorship. But given the long track record of disputes, it's clear this was more than just a simple disagreement. Here's another hook to keep in mind. What happens now to Ben & Jerry's without one of its founders? For years, even under corporate ownership, Greenfield & Cohen gave the brand a sense of authenticity, reminding consumers that this wasn't just ice cream churned out by executives. It was still tied to the values of two idealistic entrepreneurs. Without Greenfield, that connection may be harder to sustain. Fans who bought in not just for the flavor but for the philosophy might start to wonder if Ben & Jerry's has truly lost its soul. And yet, the fight is far from over. Greenfield's resignation comes alongside Cohen's continued activism. The two of them together have been pressuring Unilever for years, and they may now double down on their efforts outside the company. Their open letter already floated the idea of spinning Ben & Jerry's into an independent entity. Could this resignation be the first step toward mounting public pressure for a breakup? That's something worth watching. Let's zoom out for a second. This isn't the first time we've seen corporations clash with activist brands. When companies are acquired, promises of independence often fade over time. The priorities of global shareholders, profit, risk management, political neutrality, rarely line up with the values of outspoken founders. Ben & Jerry's might be the most high-profile example, but it's part of a much bigger pattern. How do you balance activism with global business? Can a brand be both a social justice warrior and a money-making machine for shareholders? And here's where the stakes get really interesting. If Unilever succeeds in fully silencing Ben & Jerry's, what message does that send to other socially conscious brands? Does it mean activism only works until a brand gets too big, too visible, or too controversial? Or could Greenfield's dramatic exit inspire a new wave of companies to fight harder for their independence? These are the questions swirling now, not just in the food industry but across corporate America. For consumers, this story may hit differently. For many, buying a pint of Ben & Jerry's wasn't just about Chunky Monkey or Cherry Garcia. It was about supporting a company that spoke up when others stayed quiet. The bond between consumer and brand went deeper than taste. It was about identity. And now that bond may be tested. If Jerry Greenfield is out, and if Unilever keeps tightening control, will loyal fans stick with the brand? Or will they feel betrayed, just as Greenfield does? As we move forward, one thing is clear. This isn't just about ice cream anymore. It's about whether voices that challenge power can survive inside corporate structures. Jerry Greenfield has chosen his side. He's chosen to step away rather than compromise. And his departure leaves us with a haunting question. If even Ben & Jerry's can be silenced, what does that mean for other brands that dare to stand up for justice? So here's the final thought. Jerry Greenfield's resignation marks the end of an era, but perhaps the beginning of a new fight. For him, the values of justice, equity, and humanity were non-negotiable. For Unilever, the priorities of global business may take precedence. The clash between those two forces, idealism and profit, has never been more visible. And now, with Greenfield gone, the world will be watching what happens next, both inside Ben & Jerry's and beyond. Because this story isn't really about dessert. It's about the power struggle over who gets to speak, who gets to protest, and who gets to decide whether values matter in a corporate world. And as Jerry Greenfield walks away after 47 years, he leaves us with a legacy of courage, but also a warning. If brands built on justice can be silenced, then the responsibility to keep speaking out may fall to all of us.